My name is Jessica Morgan, and I'm 26 years old. Standing in my empty garage with trembling hands clutching my car keys, I stared at the vacant space where my brand new 2024 Honda Civic should have been. The cherry red paint that had gleamed under these fluorescent lights just 12 hours ago had vanished without a trace. 3 years of saving every penny from my software engineering job, skipping vacations, eating ramen noodles, and working overtime had finally paid off when I bought my first car without anyone's help. But now my phone buzzed with a text from my 23-year-old sister Amber that made my blood run cold. Before we dive into this unbelievable family betrayal story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. If this story resonates with you or you've experienced similar family drama, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next when I discovered my own parents had stolen my car and given it to my sister like it was theirs to give away. The text message from Amber burned into my retinas as I read it over and over again. "Thanks for the car, sis. Mom and Dad said you wanted me to have it." My heart pounded against my ribcage as I immediately called my parents. Robert Morgan, my father, answered on the second ring with that familiar gruff voice that had commanded respect in our household for decades. "What do you want, Jessica?" "We're busy helping Amber get settled with her new transportation situation." "Dad, where is my car?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like an eternity before my mother Linda's voice chimed in from the background. She had clearly put the phone on speaker, and I could hear the defensive tone already building in her words. "Honey, family needs to stick together and share what they have. Amber had that terrible accident last week, and her old car is completely totaled. She needs reliable transportation to keep her job at the boutique, and you have perfectly good public transit options to get to your office downtown." The manipulation in her voice was so thick I could practically taste it through the phone. This was the same woman who had promised Amber a replacement car after her accident, the same woman who had spent the last week complaining about their tight finances and how they couldn't afford to help their youngest daughter. Now suddenly my hard-earned property had become the family's communal asset to redistribute as they saw fit. "Mom, that car belongs to me. I have the title, the insurance, the loan paperwork. You can't just take someone's property and give it away." Robert's voice boomed back into the conversation with that intimidating authority he had perfected during my childhood. "Listen here, young lady. Your sister needs that car more than you do. You're being selfish and inconsiderate, thinking only about yourself when family should come first. If you can't understand basic human decency and generosity toward your own flesh and blood, then maybe you don't deserve to be part of this family at all." The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and I could feel the familiar childhood fear creeping back into my chest. But this wasn't about childhood dynamics anymore. This was about $25,000 of my own money, my own credit score, my own legal responsibility. I had spent months researching the perfect vehicle, comparing insurance rates, negotiating with dealers, and carefully budgeting every aspect of this purchase. The cherry red Honda Civic represented more than just transportation. It symbolized my independence, my financial responsibility, and my ability to take care of myself without relying on family handouts or manipulation. Linda's voice returned with that syrupy sweet tone she reserved for her most manipulative moments. "Sweetheart, your sister posted such beautiful pictures with the car on her Instagram. She's so happy and grateful for your generosity. Surely you don't want to take that joy away from her. She's been through such a difficult time lately, and this gift from her big sister means the world to her. Don't you want to be the kind of person who helps others instead of hoarding material possessions?" The gaslighting was so blatant it made my head spin. Amber hadn't worked a full-time job in over 2 years, constantly quitting positions because they were too stressful or beneath her talents. She lived rent-free in my parents' basement, spent money on designer clothes and expensive makeup, and had never shown an ounce of gratitude for the countless times our family had bailed her out of financial trouble. Meanwhile, I had been the responsible one, the one who never asked for help, the one who quietly supported myself through college and built a stable career. If you make this into some kind of legal issue, Robert continued, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper that had terrified me as a child, don't expect to be welcome in this house anymore. We raised you better than to attack your own family over material possessions. Your sister is vulnerable right now, and if you try to hurt her by taking away the one thing that's brought her happiness in months, then you're not the daughter we thought we raised. As I hung up the phone, the full weight of the situation crashed down on me like a tsunami. My own parents had conspired to steal my property and gaslight me into believing I was the villain for wanting it back. They had taken the spare key I had given them for emergencies and used it to commit what was essentially grand theft auto. The betrayal cut deeper than any romantic heartbreak I had ever experienced because it came from the people who were supposed to protect and support me unconditionally. Driving my coworker's borrowed Toyota to my childhood home felt surreal, like approaching a crime scene where I was somehow both victim and accused perpetrator. The familiar white colonial house with its perfectly manicured lawn looked exactly the same, but everything felt different now that I knew what my own family was capable of. I had spent sleepless hours the night before rehearsing what I would say, how I would demand justice, how I would make them understand the magnitude of their betrayal. The front door opened before I could even knock, and Amber stood there wearing a designer dress I had never seen before, her makeup flawless despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. She immediately launched into what could only be described as an Academy Award-worthy performance, sobbing about how grateful she was for my incredible generosity and how she never expected her big sister to be so wonderful and selfless. The manipulation was so obvious it made my stomach turn, but I could see my parents nodding approvingly in the background like proud directors watching their protégé nail a difficult scene. "Amber, where are my car keys?" I said firmly, cutting through her theatrical display. "I need my vehicle back immediately. You can't just take someone's property without permission." Her tears instantly transformed into a look of shocked confusion, as if I had just slapped her across the face for no apparent reason. Linda rushed forward like a mother bear protecting her cub, positioning herself between Amber and me with the kind of protective fury usually reserved for strangers threatening her children. "How dare you speak to your sister like that?" Linda's hand connected with my cheek before I even saw it coming, the sharp sting bringing tears to my eyes and leaving my face burning with pain and humiliation. "I raised you to be compassionate and generous, not selfish and cruel. Your sister is going through the most difficult time of her life, and instead of supporting her, you want to take away the one thing that's helping her heal from her trauma." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. This was the same woman who had spent my entire childhood preaching about honesty, integrity, and respecting other people's belongings. She had punished me severely for much smaller infractions like borrowing Amber's clothes without permission or eating the last cookie in the jar. Now she was physically assaulting me for demanding the return of my own legally owned property worth more than most people's annual salary. Amber stepped back into the spotlight with renewed dramatic flair, her voice quivering with perfectly calculated emotion. "Jessica, you told Mom and Dad that you wanted me to have the car because you felt guilty about having so much more than me. You said it would make you happy to help your little sister get back on her feet after the accident. Why are you changing your story now? Are you having some kind of mental breakdown or memory problems?" The boldness of the lie took my breath away. She was rewriting history in real time, creating a completely fictional narrative where I had voluntarily donated my car out of sisterly love and was now suffering from some kind of psychological episode that made me forget my own generous decision. Robert stepped forward with his arms crossed, his face set in the stern expression that had ended every childhood argument in his favor. "Jessica, I think you need professional help. This kind of erratic behavior and false accusations against your own family suggests some serious underlying issues. Your sister is telling the truth about your conversation, and frankly, I'm concerned about your mental state if you can't remember offering to help her." His voice carried that authoritative tone that had always made me doubt my own perceptions and memories, the same psychological manipulation that had kept me compliant throughout my childhood. I pulled out my phone and showed them the title documents, the insurance paperwork, the loan information, all clearly showing my name as the sole owner of the vehicle. "These are legal documents proving ownership. You had no right to take my property, regardless of what stories you're telling yourselves to justify theft. But logic and evidence meant nothing in the face of their united front of manipulation and gaslighting. Get out of my house right now. Robert's voice exploded with rage as he pointed toward the door. I will not have you making these insane accusations and upsetting your sister during her recovery. You are no longer welcome here until you get whatever mental health treatment you obviously need. And if you continue with these delusions and threats, I'll have no choice but to tell everyone in our community about your psychological problems. As I walked toward my borrowed car under the judgmental stares of neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation, I realized that my own family had just declared war on me. They weren't going to return my property willingly, they weren't going to acknowledge any wrongdoing, and they were prepared to destroy my reputation and relationships to protect their version of reality. The isolation felt suffocating as I drove away from the only home I had ever known, branded as mentally unstable and ungrateful by the very people who had raised me. The first 24 hours after being exiled from my family home passed in a blur of research, phone calls, and growing determination. I spent the entire night reading about property theft laws, vehicle ownership rights, and the legal definition of grand theft auto. What my parents and sister had done wasn't just morally wrong. It was a serious felony that could result in significant jail time and financial penalties. Armed with this knowledge, I made my first call to Emma Rodriguez, a criminal defense attorney whose online reviews praised her expertise in family-related property disputes. Emma's office was located in a sleek downtown building, and her professional demeanor immediately put me at ease. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, occasionally taking notes and asking clarifying questions about the timeline of events. When I finished my story, she leaned back in her leather chair and shook her head with a mixture of disbelief and professional recognition. Jessica, what you're describing is textbook grand theft auto, conspiracy to commit theft, and potentially fraud depending on how they obtained the spare key. The fact that their family members doesn't provide any legal protection for these crimes. She explained that my documentation was ironclad proof of ownership, and the lack of any written agreement or legal transfer of title made their possession of the vehicle completely illegitimate. The challenge we're going to face is that many people, including some law enforcement officers, have a bias toward treating family disputes as civil matters rather than criminal ones. We need to be prepared with overwhelming evidence and a clear presentation of the facts to overcome that bias. Over the next several days, I methodically gathered every piece of evidence related to the purchase and theft of my vehicle. Bank statements showing the down payment and monthly loan payments, insurance documents listing me as the primary policyholder, the original sales contract with my signature, and even photographs of me at the dealership during the purchase process. I also began documenting every interaction with my family, recording phone calls where legally permissible and saving text messages that demonstrated their admission of taking the car. The breakthrough came when I contacted the Honda dealership where I had purchased the vehicle and discovered that Amber had already brought the car in for service work, claiming to be the owner despite not having any proper documentation. The service manager, Michael Chen, remembered the interaction because Amber had become belligerent when asked for proof of ownership and had stormed out claiming she would take her business elsewhere. More importantly, she had left behind a business card from a used car dealer where she was apparently trying to sell the vehicle. This revelation made my blood run cold. Not only had my family stolen my car, but Amber was actively trying to convert it to cash for her own purposes. Emma immediately filed an emergency motion to prevent the sale of the vehicle and sent cease and desist letters to several area dealers warning them that the car was stolen property. We're dealing with someone who has escalated from theft to potential money laundering, Emma explained. This shows premeditation and a clear intent to permanently deprive you of your property. But my family wasn't content to simply ignore my legal efforts. Linda began a campaign of harassment designed to undermine my credibility and professional reputation. She called my workplace claiming to be a concerned family member reporting that I was experiencing a mental health crisis and might be dangerous to myself or others. My supervisor, Mark Thompson, called me into his office with a concerned expression and gently asked if I was dealing with any personal issues that might be affecting my work performance. "Jessica, I got a very disturbing call from someone claiming to be your mother. She said you've been making threats against family members and showing signs of psychological instability. I know this is awkward, but I have to ask if there's any truth to these concerns. Our company has protocols for ensuring workplace safety, and I need to understand what's really going on." The humiliation of having to explain my family's criminal behavior to my employer was overwhelming, but Mark's response was surprisingly supportive once he understood the situation. The psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. I was fighting a legal battle against people who were supposed to love and protect me, defending my sanity against false accusations of mental illness, and trying to maintain professional composure while my personal life crumbled around me. Sleep became elusive as anxiety consumed my nights, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering what new attack my family would launch against my reputation and livelihood. But Emma's legal strategy was beginning to show results. She had connections with law enforcement officers who specialized in property crimes, and she arranged a meeting with Detective Maria Santos, a veteran investigator who had extensive experience with family-related theft cases. "The key to making this case stick," Detective Santos explained, "is establishing a clear timeline and demonstrating that this was premeditated rather than a misunderstanding. If we can show that your sister and parents planned this theft in advance, we can pursue conspiracy charges that carry much more serious penalties." Just when I thought the situation couldn't get worse, Amber and her boyfriend Derek Stevens launched a coordinated character assassination campaign designed to destroy my credibility and professional reputation. Derek, whom I had met only briefly at family gatherings, apparently had experience with social media manipulation and online harassment tactics. Together, they created fake accounts on various platforms and began spreading rumors that I was addicted to prescription drugs, had a history of violence against family members, and was experiencing a severe mental health crisis that made me dangerous to be around. The rumors spread through our small community like wildfire, reaching my workplace, my neighborhood, and my social circles with devastating effectiveness. I started noticing strange looks from coworkers, whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by, and a general atmosphere of suspicion and concern wherever I went. The psychological warfare was more effective than any legal strategy my family could have employed, attacking the very foundation of my professional and personal relationships. Human Resources called me into another meeting, this time with a much more serious tone. Carol Williams, the HR director, had received multiple anonymous reports about my alleged drug use and erratic behavior. "Jessica, I need you to understand that we take workplace safety very seriously, and we've received some concerning reports about your personal situation. While we value you as an employee, we need to ensure that any personal issues aren't affecting your work performance or creating a hostile environment for other employees." The meeting felt like a trial where I was simultaneously the defendant, the prosecutor, and the only witness for the defense. I tried to explain the situation objectively, providing documentation about the car theft and the legal proceedings, but I could see the doubt in Carol's eyes. The stories my family had planted were designed to make me sound paranoid and unstable, exactly the kind of person who might fabricate elaborate conspiracy theories about loving family members trying to help during a crisis. Meanwhile, my mother escalated her psychological warfare to a new level by showing up at my workplace during lunch hour, creating a public scene designed to maximize embarrassment and reinforce the narrative that I was mentally unstable. She arrived dressed in black like she was attending a funeral, carrying tissues and maintaining the appearance of a grieving mother dealing with a disturbed daughter. Her performance in the lobby was worthy of a professional theater, complete with tears, trembling hands, and a voice that projected just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Please, Jessica, let us help you get the treatment you need," Linda pleaded loudly, ensuring that every employee in the vicinity could hear her words. "We love you so much, and we're so worried about these delusions and paranoid thoughts you've been having. Your sister is terrified that you might hurt yourself or someone else. We just want our daughter back, the sweet, loving girl you used to be before this mental illness took over your life." The humiliation was excruciating. Dozens of my colleagues witnessed this theatrical display, and I could see their expressions changing from curiosity to concern to pity as they absorbed my mother's carefully crafted narrative. She had effectively painted me as a dangerous, delusional individual whose loving family was desperately trying to save her from self-destruction. The fact that she was performing this scene at my workplace, in front of my professional peers, added an extra layer of cruelty to the manipulation. Robert's contribution to the harassment campaign was equally calculated and devastating. He began contacting my apartment building management, claiming to be a concerned father worried about his daughter's mental health and potential danger to other residents. He spun elaborate stories about my supposed history of violence, drug abuse, and erratic behavior, suggesting that I might be a threat to community safety and property values. My landlord, Mrs. Patterson, called me with obvious reluctance and discomfort. "Jessica, I've received some very disturbing calls from someone claiming to be your father. He's making some serious accusations about your mental health and behavior. I've never had any problems with you as a tenant, but these allegations are concerning enough that I need to address them officially. If there's any truth to these claims, or if your personal situation is going to create ongoing drama and disturbance in the building, we may need to discuss alternative living arrangements." The systematic destruction of my reputation was breathtakingly thorough and professionally executed. My family had identified every aspect of my stable, independent life and targeted each one with precision designed to create maximum damage. They weren't just trying to keep the car. They were trying to destroy my entire existence to ensure I would never have the resources or credibility to challenge them legally. The final blow came when I discovered that Derek had somehow gained access to my personal banking information and had helped Amber steal an additional $3,000 from my savings account. The unauthorized withdrawal had been disguised as an electronic transfer to a legitimate-sounding business account, but Emma's investigation revealed that the receiving account belonged to a shell company Derek had created specifically for money laundering purposes. "This changes everything," Emma explained when I showed her the banking records. "We're no longer dealing with simple theft, this is organized financial fraud with interstate implications." Derek's involvement suggests this is a more sophisticated criminal operation than we initially realized. The good news is that these charges carry much more serious penalties and will be taken very seriously by law enforcement. But the knowledge that my troubles were escalating to federal crime levels provided little comfort when I was facing the imminent loss of my job, my housing, and my reputation. The stress was taking a physical toll that was becoming impossible to hide. I was losing weight, developing insomnia, and struggling to maintain the professional demeanor necessary to keep my career intact. The isolation was perhaps the worst part. Everyone I had trusted and relied on was either attacking me directly or beginning to believe the lies being spread about my mental health and character. Just when I felt completely alone and overwhelmed by the coordinated attack on my life, an unexpected ally emerged from within my own workplace. Carol Williams, the HR director who had initially seemed skeptical of my situation, approached me privately after witnessing my mother's theatrical performance in the lobby. Her expression was a mixture of professional concern and personal compassion as she asked me to join her for coffee in a quiet corner of the building's cafeteria. "Jessica, I want you to know that I've been watching this situation very carefully, and I'm starting to see some patterns that concern me greatly," Carol began, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Your mother's behavior yesterday was extremely manipulative and calculated. The timing, the location, the volume of her voice, even her wardrobe choices seemed designed to create maximum embarrassment and reinforce a specific narrative. In my 20 years of HR experience, I've seen family members genuinely concerned about mental health issues, and this isn't what that looks like." Her validation felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. For weeks, I had been questioning my own perceptions and wondering if maybe my family was right about my mental state. Having a neutral professional observer confirm that the behavior patterns were abnormal and manipulative helped restore my confidence in my own judgment. Carol offered to document the incident officially and provide a statement for my legal proceedings if necessary. The second unexpected ally came in the form of Detective Maria Santos, who had been assigned to investigate my case after Emma filed the formal criminal complaint. Detective Santos had 15 years of experience with property crimes and family-related theft cases, and her first meeting with me revealed a sharp, analytical mind that wasn't easily fooled by manipulation tactics. She listened to my story with professional detachment, asking detailed questions and taking careful notes throughout our conversation. "What stands out to me immediately," Detective Santos explained, "is the level of coordination between multiple family members and the boyfriend. This isn't a spontaneous decision or a misunderstanding. This is a planned criminal operation with multiple participants working together to steal and convert your property. The fact that they've escalated to identity theft and banking fraud suggests this isn't their first time engaging in this type of activity." Her investigation began immediately, starting with a comprehensive background check on all the involved parties. What she discovered was shocking and validated every suspicion I had developed about my family's true nature. Amber had a criminal record dating back 2 years, including charges for petty theft, check fraud, and identity theft that had somehow been kept hidden from me. Derek Stevens had an even more extensive history, with convictions for burglary, fraud, and receiving stolen property across 3 different states. "Your sister and her boyfriend are career criminals," Detective Santos informed me during our second meeting. "They've been working together on various scams and theft operations for at least 18 months. The car theft isn't an isolated incident, it's part of a larger pattern of criminal behavior that your parents have been enabling and potentially participating in." The revelation that my family had been harboring and supporting known criminals while simultaneously destroying my reputation was devastating but also empowering. It meant that my instincts about their behavior had been correct, and it provided concrete evidence that their actions were part of a deliberate criminal pattern rather than a family misunderstanding. Emma immediately filed motions to include this background information in our case, arguing that it demonstrated clear intent and premeditation. Meanwhile, the investigation into the unauthorized banking transactions revealed even more disturbing information. Derek had used sophisticated techniques to gain access to my financial accounts, suggesting either inside information or professional-level hacking skills. The electronic trail showed that the stolen money had been quickly transferred through multiple accounts in an apparent effort to obscure the source and make recovery difficult. This level of financial fraud requires planning and technical knowledge, Detective Santos explained. Either Derek has professional training in financial crimes, or he's working with someone who does. We're expanding our investigation to include potential accomplices and looking into whether your family has been involved in similar schemes with other victims. The possibility that I wasn't their only target was both horrifying and somehow comforting. If they had victimized others, it meant there might be additional evidence and witnesses to support the case against them. It also meant that stopping them could prevent other families from experiencing the same betrayal and financial devastation that I was enduring. Carol Williams proved to be an invaluable ally in protecting my professional reputation during this chaotic period. She began documenting every contact my family made with the company, creating an official record of harassment that would be useful in legal proceedings. When Robert called the office again with more false accusations about my mental health, Carol was ready with a professional response that shut down his manipulation attempts immediately. "Mr. Morgan, I need to inform you that we've documented multiple instances of what appears to be harassment targeting your daughter in her workplace," Carol told him firmly. "Our investigation has found no evidence supporting any of your allegations, and we consider these repeated contacts to be attempts at workplace interference. Any further contact from you or other family members will be referred to our legal department and local law enforcement." The support from these unexpected allies began to shift the entire dynamic of the situation. Instead of feeling isolated and defensive, I started to feel like I had a team of professionals working to expose the truth and protect my interests. Detective Santos's investigation was uncovering evidence faster than I had dared to hope, and Emma's legal strategy was becoming more aggressive as the true scope of the criminal behavior became clear. But perhaps the most important ally was someone I hadn't expected at all. Sandra Mitchell, a co-worker from the accounting department, approached me hesitantly one afternoon with information that would prove crucial to the case. She had overheard Linda's conversation with someone on her phone while she was in the lobby creating her scene, and what she had heard suggested that the entire performance had been rehearsed and coordinated in advance. "I know this sounds crazy," Sandra said quietly, "but your mother was on the phone with someone right before she started that whole crying scene. She said something like, 'Okay, I'm going in now. Remember, stick to the story about the drugs and the violence. If anyone asks, you don't know anything about any car.'" It sounded like she was getting final instructions from someone about what to say and how to act. This revelation provided the missing piece of evidence that Detective Santos needed to prove conspiracy. The fact that Linda had been coached by someone else before her workplace harassment demonstrated that multiple people were coordinating their efforts to destroy my credibility and cover up their crimes. It also suggested that there was a ringleader directing the overall strategy, possibly Derek or someone else with experience in criminal operations. Detective Santos moved swiftly once she had enough evidence to justify search warrants for my parents' home and Derek's apartment. The early morning raid on the family house was surreal to watch from across the street, where I waited with Emma as police officers systematically searched for evidence of the conspiracy against me. The sight of my childhood home being treated as a crime scene was emotionally devastating, but I knew it was necessary to expose the truth and recover my stolen property. The search yielded more evidence than even Detective Santos had expected. Hidden in Robert's home office, investigators found a detailed notebook containing what appeared to be a step-by-step plan for stealing my car and discrediting me if I tried to recover it. The handwriting was clearly my father's, and the timeline showed that they had been planning this operation for over 2 months before actually executing it. The level of premeditation was shocking even to the experienced detective. "This is one of the most thorough criminal conspiracies I've seen in a family setting," Detective Santos explained as she showed me photographs of the evidence. "Your father documented everything: when you got the spare key, your work schedule, your financial situation, even your personality traits and how you might react to different manipulation tactics. This wasn't a spontaneous decision, it was a carefully planned criminal operation targeting someone they knew intimately." The notebook contained disturbing details about my personal life that my parents had gathered through years of subtle questioning and observation. They knew exactly how much money I had saved, when I received paychecks, what my monthly expenses were, and even which days I typically stayed late at work. This intelligence had been used to plan the optimal timing for the theft and to prepare responses for various scenarios depending on how I might react. Even more disturbing were the character assassination strategies they had developed in case I tried to seek legal recourse. The notebook contained detailed plans for undermining my credibility through false allegations of mental illness, drug abuse, and violence. They had researched the symptoms of various psychological disorders and planned to accuse me of conditions that would make my testimony seem unreliable while generating sympathy for themselves as concerned family members. Linda's initial interrogation at the police station revealed the depth of her involvement and the twisted logic she had used to justify their actions. According to the transcript that Emma obtained, Linda genuinely believed that everything she had done was morally justified because successful children have an obligation to support struggling family members. She saw my financial independence and career success as resources that rightfully belonged to the entire family, particularly Amber, who she viewed as needing more help and support. "I don't understand why Jessica is being so selfish about this," Linda told Detective Santos during questioning. "She has a good job and can afford to buy another car. Amber doesn't have those advantages, and she needed transportation more urgently. As a family, we're supposed to help each other, and sometimes that means making sacrifices for the people we love. I was trying to teach Jessica about generosity and putting family first." The interrogation revealed that Linda had been the primary architect of the psychological manipulation campaign, drawing on techniques she had learned from self-help books about persuasion and influence. She had studied how to gaslight effectively, how to create doubt in someone's memory and perceptions, and how to use emotional manipulation to control behavior. Her application of these techniques against her own daughter was both methodical and ruthless. Robert's confession was even more disturbing because it revealed the underlying resentment and jealousy that had motivated his participation in the conspiracy. During his interview with Detective Santos, he expressed anger about my independence and success, claiming that I had gotten too big for my britches and needed to be brought down a peg. He viewed my refusal to automatically share my resources with Amber as evidence of selfishness and ingratitude that needed to be corrected. Jessica has always thought she was better than the rest of us, Robert told investigators. She went to college, got that fancy job, acts like she's so independent and doesn't need family. Well, maybe it's time she learned that family always comes first, and if she won't share willingly, then we'll find other ways to make sure Amber gets what she needs. Sometimes you have to humble people who forget where they came from. The search of Derek's apartment uncovered evidence of the broader criminal operation that my family had unknowingly become involved with. Derek was apparently part of a larger network specializing in identity theft, financial fraud, and property conversion. He had been using Amber as a way to access potential victims within families, identifying people with assets that could be stolen and converted to cash quickly. Detective Santos found stolen credit cards, fake identification documents, and equipment for creating fraudulent financial accounts. Derek's computer contained detailed profiles of multiple potential victims, including personal information about their finances, work schedules, and family relationships. My profile was just one of dozens, suggesting that he had been systematically targeting people through their romantic relationships with various accomplices. Your sister was essentially being used as bait in a much larger criminal operation, Detective Santos explained. Derek identified her as someone with access to a potentially wealthy family member, and he cultivated the relationship specifically to gain access to you and your assets. The car theft was probably just the beginning of what they had planned. The revelation that Amber had been manipulated by a professional criminal added a complex layer to my feelings about the situation. While it didn't excuse her participation in the theft and fraud, it did suggest that she might have been as much a victim of Derek's manipulation as I was. However, her enthusiastic participation in the character assassination campaign and her attempts to sell my car suggested that she had been a willing accomplice rather than a reluctant victim. When confronted with the evidence from the search warrants, Amber's facade finally cracked completely. According to Detective Santos, she broke down during questioning and admitted to the entire scheme, though she tried to minimize her role and blame Derek for pressuring her into participating. Her confession provided crucial details about the timeline of events and confirmed that the theft had been planned well in advance of its execution. "I never wanted to hurt Jessica," Amber reportedly told investigators between sobs. Derek said it would be easy money and that Jessica would never even miss the car because she makes so much money. He promised we could pay her back later, and he said families share things all the time, so it wasn't really stealing. But then when she got upset and threatened to call the police, Derek said we had to protect ourselves and make it look like she was having mental problems. The confession revealed that Derek had been coaching all of them on how to manipulate me and cover up their crimes. He had provided specific scripts for phone conversations, detailed instructions for creating false narratives about my mental health, and strategic advice about how to time their attacks for maximum psychological impact. The level of coordination and premeditation made their actions far more serious from a legal perspective. As news of the arrest spread through our community, the narrative that my family had worked so hard to create began to crumble. People who had believed their stories about my mental illness and drug problems started to realize they had been manipulated into participating in a character assassination campaign. Several neighbors and community members reached out to apologize for their treatment of me and to offer support during the legal proceedings. The vindication felt profound but also bittersweet. While I was grateful that the truth was finally being exposed, the damage to family relationships was irreversible. There was no coming back from the discovery that my own parents had planned and executed a criminal conspiracy against me, documenting their manipulation strategies and coordinating with career criminals to steal my property and destroy my reputation. The decision to proceed with criminal prosecution despite my family's desperate pleas for mercy was one of the most difficult choices I had ever made, but Emma Rodriguez convinced me it was necessary to prevent future victimization and to send a clear message about the consequences of this type of family betrayal. The formal charges were more serious than I had initially expected. Amber faced grand theft auto and multiple fraud charges that could result in 3 to 5 years in prison, while Robert and Linda were charged with conspiracy, accessory to theft, and criminal harassment. Derek's charges were the most extensive because of his leadership role in the conspiracy and his extensive criminal history. The federal authorities had become involved due to the interstate nature of his fraud operations, and he was facing potential sentences of 10 to 15 years if convicted on all counts. His apartment search had revealed evidence linking him to similar schemes in multiple states, making him a priority target for law enforcement agencies that had been tracking his criminal network. The first court hearing was an emotionally devastating experience that tested my resolve and commitment to seeking justice. Sitting in the courtroom and watching my family enter in handcuffs was surreal and heartbreaking, despite everything they had done to me. Amber looked frail and vulnerable in her orange jumpsuit, and my parents appeared to have aged years in the few weeks since their arrest. The manipulation continued even in this setting, as they made sure to look directly at me with expressions of hurt and betrayal, as if I were the one who had wronged them. Amber's defense attorney, a public defender named James Peterson, immediately began implementing a strategy designed to portray me as a vindictive and unforgiving sister who was using the legal system to punish her family for minor misunderstandings. During his opening statement, he painted Amber as a vulnerable young woman who had been manipulated by an older, more experienced criminal boyfriend and who was now being further victimized by her own sister's refusal to show compassion and understanding. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Peterson began, "this case is about a family tragedy that has been blown out of proportion by someone who values material possessions more than family relationships. Amber Stevens is not a hardened criminal. She's a confused young woman who made poor choices under the influence of someone who claimed to love her. Her own sister could end this prosecution at any time by showing mercy and forgiveness, but instead she chooses to pursue charges that could destroy her sister's entire future over a car that insurance would have replaced." The defense strategy was emotionally manipulative and professionally effective, designed to make the jury see me as cold and unreasonable rather than as a victim of serious crimes. Peterson repeatedly emphasized the family relationship and suggested that criminal prosecution was an inappropriate response to what should have been handled as a private family matter. He portrayed my refusal to drop charges as evidence of vindictiveness rather than a principled stand against criminal behavior. My parents' attorney, Margaret Foster, employed a similar strategy but focused more on their roles as concerned parents who had made misguided attempts to help their struggling daughter. She argued that their actions, while technically illegal, were motivated by love and family loyalty rather than criminal intent. Foster presented character witnesses who testified about Robert and Linda's years of community involvement and their reputation as caring, devoted parents. "My clients are not criminals in any meaningful sense of the word," Foster argued. "They are parents who saw one daughter struggling and another daughter who seemed to have more resources than she needed. Their judgment was flawed, and their methods were inappropriate, but their motivation was love for both of their children. They believed they were facilitating a generous gesture from Jessica to Amber, not committing theft. The fact that they misunderstood the situation doesn't make them criminals deserving of imprisonment." The emotional manipulation was professionally executed and personally devastating. Watching my family's attorneys paint me as an unforgiving monster while portraying actual criminals as loving family members was surreal and infuriating. Several times during the proceedings, I questioned whether I was doing the right thing by refusing to drop the charges and allowing my family to escape the consequences of their actions. Emma Rodriguez's prosecution strategy was methodical and evidence-focused, relying on the extensive documentation that Detective Santos had gathered during her investigation. She presented the jury with Robert's detailed planning notebook, phone records showing coordination between family members, and financial records proving the theft of money from my banking accounts. The evidence was overwhelming and difficult to explain away through emotional appeals. "The defendants want you to believe this was a spontaneous family misunderstanding, but the evidence tells a very different story," Emma told the jury. Robert Morgan's notebook shows months of planning and detailed preparation for stealing his daughter's property and discrediting her if she objected. This wasn't love, this was a calculated criminal conspiracy that involved identity theft, fraud, and systematic harassment designed to destroy the victim's livelihood and reputation. The testimony phase of the trial was particularly difficult because it required me to describe the psychological manipulation and family betrayal in detail while my parents and sister sat just a few feet away. Speaking publicly about the character assassination campaign, the workplace harassment, and the systematic destruction of my relationships felt like exposing the most private wounds of my life to public scrutiny. However, Emma had prepared me well for the emotional challenges of testifying about family trauma. Detective Santos's testimony provided crucial credibility to my claims about the conspiracy and the premeditated nature of the crimes. Her professional analysis of the evidence and her explanation of the investigation process helped the jury understand the serious nature of the charges and the thoroughness of the police work. She was particularly effective in explaining how the defendant's actions fit established patterns of organized criminal behavior rather than spontaneous family conflicts. Based on my 15 years of experience investigating property crimes and family disputes, Detective Santos testified, this case shows clear evidence of premeditation, conspiracy, and escalation that's typical of organized criminal operations. The level of planning, the coordination between multiple participants, and the sophisticated character assassination campaign all indicate professional-level criminal thinking rather than family members acting impulsively out of love or concern. The most damaging testimony came from Derek Stevens himself, who had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. His detailed description of how he had identified me as a potential victim and cultivated a relationship with Amber specifically to gain access to my assets was chilling and professionally delivered. He showed no remorse for the psychological damage his operation had caused, treating it as a business transaction that had unfortunately been discovered. I researched Jessica's financial situation for several months before approaching Amber, Derek testified. I knew exactly how much she made, what her expenses were, and what assets she had that could be converted to cash quickly. The car was perfect because it was new, valuable, and easy to resell. Amber was useful because she had access to Jessica's home and could provide inside information about her schedule and security measures. His testimony revealed that my family had been completely manipulated by someone with professional criminal skills, but it also showed their willingness to participate in illegal activities once they understood what was being asked of them. The prosecution used Derek's confession to demonstrate that Robert, Linda, and Amber had made conscious choices to participate in criminal acts despite understanding the legal and ethical implications of their actions. The jury deliberation lasted 3 days, and the waiting period was excruciating as I contemplated the possibility that my family might be acquitted and that I would be seen as someone who had falsely accused innocent people of serious crimes. Emma tried to reassure me that the evidence was overwhelming and that conviction was highly likely, but the uncertainty was emotionally devastating as I wondered whether I would be vindicated or further victimized by the legal system. When the verdicts were finally announced, the convictions were comprehensive and unambiguous. Amber was found guilty on all charges related to theft and fraud, while Robert and Linda were convicted of conspiracy and harassment. Derek received the harshest sentence due to his leadership role and extensive criminal history. The judge's comments during sentencing revealed her own shock at the level of family betrayal involved in the case. In 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case where family members showed such calculated cruelty towards someone they claimed to love, Judge Patricia Morrison said during sentencing. The defendants exploited intimate family knowledge to commit serious crimes and then attempted to destroy their victims' mental health and professional reputation to cover up their actions. This behavior represents a profound betrayal of the most basic principles of family loyalty and human decency. The weeks following the convictions brought a series of additional revelations that fundamentally changed my understanding of my family dynamics and my own place within them. Detective Santos continued her investigation into Derek's criminal network and discovered evidence that my family's targeting of me was part of a much larger pattern of abuse and manipulation that had been going on for years without my awareness. The most shocking discovery came from Derek's computer files, which contained detailed psychological profiles of family members that had been compiled over several months of observation and manipulation. His analysis of my relationship with Amber revealed that he had identified and exploited existing family dynamics that made me vulnerable to guilt and manipulation. According to his notes, Linda had been conditioning me for years to prioritize Amber's needs over my own through subtle emotional manipulation and selective reinforcement of family loyalty concepts. Your family had been grooming you as a potential victim long before Derek arrived on the scene, Detective Santos explained as she showed me excerpts from Derek's files. He didn't create the dynamic where you were expected to sacrifice for Amber. He just recognized it and figured out how to exploit it for criminal purposes. The psychological manipulation you experienced during this incident was actually an escalation of patterns that had been established during your childhood. The revelation that my entire family dynamic had been fundamentally unhealthy and manipulative was devastating but also strangely liberating. It meant that the recent betrayal wasn't an aberration or a temporary lapse in judgment. It was the logical culmination of a lifetime of subtle psychological abuse designed to make me compliant and self-sacrificing. Understanding this pattern helped me realize that my decision to pursue legal action had been necessary not just for justice, but for breaking free from toxic family dynamics that would have continued to exploit me indefinitely. Emma's post-trial investigation revealed even more disturbing information about my parents' long-term intentions regarding my finances and independence. Among the evidence seized from their home were documents suggesting they had been planning to eventually gain control of my entire financial portfolio through a combination of emotional manipulation and legal maneuvering. Robert had researched guardianship laws and appeared to be laying groundwork for having me declared mentally incompetent so they could manage my assets on behalf of the family. They weren't just planning to steal your car, Emma explained. They were working toward gaining complete control over your financial life by systematically undermining your credibility and independence. The character assassination campaign wasn't just about covering up the car theft. It was about establishing a pattern of mental instability that could later be used to justify legal guardianship or conservatorship proceedings. The scope of their long-term planning was breathtaking and terrifying. Documents found in Robert's files showed that he had been consulting with attorneys about the legal requirements for declaring an adult child incompetent and assuming financial control over their assets. He had researched the symptoms of various mental health conditions and had been documenting alleged incidents of erratic behavior that could later be used as evidence in competency hearings. Linda's role in this long-term manipulation campaign was revealed through journal entries that Detective Santos discovered during the search of their home. Her writings showed a calculated approach to emotional manipulation that she had been refining for years, treating my psychological conditioning as a long-term project with specific goals and measurable outcomes. She documented my responses to various manipulation techniques and adjusted her strategies based on what proved most effective in controlling my behavior. I've been working on making Jessica more family-oriented and less selfish for years, one journal entry read. She's naturally too independent and focused on her own goals, but I've found that guilt about Amber's struggles is very effective in making her more compliant. If I can make her feel responsible for her sister's happiness and success, she'll eventually agree to share her resources more willingly. The key is making her think it's her own idea rather than something we're demanding. The revelation that my mother had been conducting a years-long psychological experiment on me was profoundly disturbing and helped explain many interactions that had never made sense before. Countless childhood memories suddenly took on new meaning as I realized that what I had interpreted as normal family dynamics were actually sophisticated manipulation techniques designed to shape my personality and behavior in ways that benefited Amber and my parents. Perhaps the most devastating discovery was evidence that Amber had been aware of and actively participating in this manipulation campaign for much longer than anyone had realized. Her text messages with Derek, which had been recovered during the investigation, revealed that she had been providing detailed information about my psychological vulnerabilities and suggesting specific tactics for exploiting my sense of family obligation. Jessica is really susceptible to guilt trips about family loyalty, one message read. If you make her think I'm really struggling and that helping me would prove she's a good sister, she'll probably agree to almost anything. She's been trained since childhood to put my needs first, so we just have to activate those conditioning patterns and she'll cooperate without realizing she's being manipulated. The casual way Amber discussed exploiting psychological conditioning that our parents had instilled during my childhood was particularly painful. It showed that she viewed me not as a beloved sister, but as a resource to be manipulated and exploited whenever she needed something. The sisterly relationship I had treasured and tried to protect was revealed to be completely one-sided and fundamentally dishonest. During the sentencing phase of the trial, additional character witnesses came forward with information that painted an even more disturbing picture of my family's treatment of me over the years. Former neighbors, family friends, and even some relatives testified about incidents they had witnessed where I was consistently treated as less important than Amber and expected to sacrifice my own needs for her benefit. Mrs. Henderson, who had lived next door to my family for over a decade, testified about Christmas mornings where I was expected to give up presents so that Amber would have more gifts to open. She described birthday parties where the focus was shifted to Amber even when it was my special day, and family outings where my preferences were consistently ignored in favor of whatever Amber wanted to do. It was heartbreaking to watch, Mrs. Henderson testified. Jessica was such a sweet, generous child, but she was constantly being taught that her own wants and needs were less important than her sister's. I saw her give up countless opportunities and experiences because the family always prioritized Amber's happiness over Jessica's well-being. It was clear that she was being raised to be a caretaker rather than an individual with her own rights and dreams. These testimonies helped explain how I had been conditioned from early childhood to accept the role of family provider and protector, sacrificing my own interests for what was presented as the greater good of family harmony. The psychological foundation for the recent betrayal had been laid over decades of subtle but consistent messaging about my obligations to put family needs before personal desires. The final revelation came during Amber's sentencing hearing, when she was given the opportunity to make a statement to the court. Instead of showing remorse for her crimes or acknowledging the harm she had caused, she used the platform to make one last attempt at manipulation, trying to paint herself as the real victim while positioning me as a cold, unforgiving sister who had abandoned her family during their time of greatest need. "I want everyone to know that I love my sister and I'm sorry she feels hurt by what happened," Amber said through tears that appeared genuine but felt completely calculated. "I never intended to cause her pain, and I hope someday she can find it in her heart to forgive me and remember that we used to be best friends. Family should mean more than money or possessions, and I pray that Jessica will realize that before it's too late to rebuild our relationship." The statement was a masterpiece of manipulation, designed to make me appear vindictive while positioning her as a loving sister who was being punished for minor mistakes. Even facing imprisonment, she continued to employ the same gaslighting techniques that had defined our relationship for years, trying to rewrite history and avoid taking responsibility for the serious crimes she had committed. But this time, the manipulation didn't work. The judge saw through the performance, and I finally understood that Amber would never acknowledge the true nature of her actions or take genuine responsibility for the harm she had caused. The sister I had loved and protected for so many years had never really existed. She had been a carefully constructed persona designed to exploit my love and loyalty for personal gain. The sentencing brought a sense of closure that I hadn't expected to feel, but it also marked the beginning of a long journey toward healing from the profound psychological damage that years of family manipulation had caused. Amber received 18 months in prison followed by 3 years of probation, along with a restitution order requiring her to repay $25,000 for the stolen car and the money taken from my bank account. Robert and Linda received suspended sentences with extensive community service requirements and probation terms that prohibited them from contacting me directly or indirectly. Derek's sentence was much harsher due to his extensive criminal history and leadership role in the conspiracy. The federal charges resulted in a 7-year prison term, and his cooperation with authorities led to the prosecution of several other members of his criminal network. Detective Santos told me that my case had helped break up a multi-state fraud operation that had victimized dozens of families through similar manipulation and theft schemes. The financial recovery process was surprisingly straightforward thanks to the thorough documentation that Emma had insisted on maintaining throughout the legal proceedings. Insurance covered most of the immediate costs associated with the theft, and the restitution orders ensured that I would eventually recover all of my losses with interest. However, the emotional and psychological recovery proved to be much more complex and challenging than simply replacing stolen money and property. Emma referred me to Dr. Rachel Thompson, a therapist who specialized in treating victims of family trauma and psychological manipulation. The therapy sessions were initially difficult because they required me to examine and reframe virtually every significant relationship and memory from my childhood and young adulthood. Dr. Thompson helped me understand that what I had experienced was a form of psychological abuse called emotional parentification, where children are conditioned to prioritize other family members' needs over their own emotional and psychological development. Your family trained you from early childhood to see your own success and happiness as less important than maintaining family harmony and supporting Amber's emotional needs, Dr. Thompson explained during one of our sessions. This conditioning made you vulnerable to exploitation because you never learned to recognize or resist manipulation tactics that targeted your sense of family obligation. The recent events weren't just criminal acts. They were the culmination of a lifetime of psychological programming designed to make you compliant and self-sacrificing. The therapy process helped me recognize patterns of manipulation and emotional abuse that extended far beyond the car theft incident. I began to see how countless childhood experiences had been designed to reinforce my role as the family caretaker while stunting my emotional development and sense of personal worth. Understanding these patterns was both liberating and devastating as I realized how much of my life had been shaped by other people's selfish agendas rather than my own authentic desires and goals. 6 months after the trial concluded, I made the difficult decision to relocate to a different city and start completely fresh in an environment where nobody knew about the family drama or legal proceedings. The software engineering skills that had made me a target for my family's criminal scheme also provided the flexibility to work remotely and build a new life wherever I chose. I selected Portland, Oregon, partly for its thriving tech industry but mostly because it was far enough away to ensure complete separation from my toxic family environment. The process of building genuine, healthy relationships after years of manipulation and betrayal was challenging but ultimately rewarding. Dr. Thompson had warned me that I might initially struggle to trust people or to recognize healthy relationship dynamics, since my primary examples of family interaction had been so fundamentally dishonest and exploitative. However, I gradually learned to identify and appreciate authentic care and support from people who had no ulterior motives for their kindness. Carol Williams from my former workplace became an unexpected mentor and friend, helping me navigate the emotional challenges of rebuilding my professional reputation and personal confidence. She introduced me to other women who had experienced various forms of family trauma, and their stories helped me understand that my experience, while extreme, was not unique. Many successful, intelligent people had survived similar patterns of family exploitation and gone on to build fulfilling, independent lives. Detective Maria Santos also maintained contact after the case was closed, partly for professional reasons related to Derek's ongoing prosecution but also because she had been genuinely affected by the level of family betrayal involved in my situation. Her perspective as a law enforcement professional helped me understand that my decision to pursue criminal charges had been not only legally justified but morally necessary to protect other potential victims of similar schemes. "You showed incredible courage by refusing to let them manipulate you into dropping the charges," Detective Santos told me during our final meeting. "Most people in your situation would have given in to the family pressure and allowed the criminals to escape consequences. By standing firm and demanding justice, you probably prevented several other families from experiencing the same type of victimization. The knowledge that my painful experience might protect others from similar betrayal provided a sense of purpose and meaning that helped transform my trauma into something constructive." I began volunteering with organizations that helped victims of financial fraud and family abuse, using my story to illustrate how manipulation tactics could be used even within supposedly loving family relationships. A year after moving to Portland, I met David Chen, a fellow software engineer who had also experienced family trauma, though of a very different nature than mine. Our relationship developed slowly and carefully as we both learned to navigate intimacy and trust after our respective experiences with family betrayal. David's patient understanding of my need for independence and his respect for my boundaries helped me understand what healthy, supportive relationships could actually look like. The most profound realization that emerged from the therapy and recovery process was understanding that the family I had lost wasn't worth grieving because it had never really existed in the first place. The loving, supportive relationships I had thought I shared with my parents and sister had been carefully constructed illusions designed to maintain my compliance and exploitation. The people I had loved and sacrificed for were fundamentally different from who I had believed them to be. This understanding was initially devastating but ultimately liberating because it meant I wasn't actually losing anything real or valuable. Instead of mourning the destruction of genuine family bonds, I was simply seeing clearly for the first time and recognizing that I had been living in a fantasy relationship with people who viewed me as a resource rather than a person deserving of love and respect. The legal victory had provided external validation that my perceptions were accurate and my reactions were justified, but the real healing came from learning to trust my own judgment and to prioritize my own well-being without guilt or apology. Dr. Thompson helped me understand that self-care and healthy boundaries weren't selfish, they were necessary for building authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation and manipulation. 2 years after the trial, I received notification that Amber was being released from prison and had requested permission to contact me through her probation officer. I declined the request without hesitation, understanding that any contact would likely be another attempt at manipulation rather than genuine remorse or desire for reconciliation. The decision felt empowering rather than cruel because it represented my commitment to protecting the healthy life I had built from people who had proven they couldn't be trusted with access to my emotions or vulnerabilities. The final lesson I learned from this traumatic experience was that family isn't defined by blood relationships or shared history, but by genuine care, respect, and mutual support between people who choose to prioritize each other's well-being. The found family I built in Portland with friends, colleagues, and my partner David provided more authentic love and support than I had ever received from my biological relatives. As I reflect on this journey, I realize that the car theft, while devastating at the time, was actually a gift in disguise because it forced me to see clearly and break free from a lifetime of psychological manipulation and exploitation. Without that dramatic betrayal, I might have continued enabling their behavior and allowing them to limit my potential and happiness indefinitely. The courage to call 911 and press charges against my own family wasn't just about recovering stolen property, it was about reclaiming my right to be treated with dignity and respect by the people in my life. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to refuse to accept treatment that falls short of what you deserve, even when that means walking away from relationships that society tells you should be unconditionally preserved. Today, I want to hear from all of you who've made it this far in my story. Have you ever experienced betrayal from family members who were supposed to protect and support you? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself when everyone around you was telling you to just forgive and move on? Share your experiences in the comments below because your stories matter and might help someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics. If this story resonated with you or helped you understand your own family relationships more clearly, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity and building authentic, healthy relationships. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update, and please share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of setting boundaries with toxic family members. Thank you for taking this difficult journey with me and for supporting my decision to speak openly about family trauma and the legal system's role in protecting victims of domestic financial crimes. I hope my story encourages you to trust your instincts, protect your well-being, and remember that you deserve relationships built on genuine love and respect rather than manipulation and exploitation. Sometimes the family you create for yourself is far more valuable than the one you were born into, and there's no shame in choosing your own happiness over maintaining toxic relationships that drain your energy and limit your potential. Remember that healing is possible, justice is achievable, and you have the right to demand better treatment from everyone in your life, regardless of their relationship to you or their claims about family loyalty. Stay strong, trust yourself, and never let anyone convince you that you're asking for too much when you simply want to be treated with basic human decency and respect.